We'll bring this meeting together. The reason for us meeting here tonight is it's a draft of a public hearing on a disorderly house ordinance. It looking like it's a public support, but whatever the public is feeling about it. So I'm going to hand this over to you, Bob, a little mic.
Okay. All right. I don't know if you all know the genesis of this ordinance. We have had several locations in town where people are using drugs, disappearing into the woods, lurking around people's homes, causing noise, multiple instances of police showing up at their house all times of the day, drug paraphernalia, whatnot. And our ordinances really don't have, our current ordinances don't have any way for the town to deal with that. And we've been using a portion of the land use ordinance that says you can only camp on a person's property for 7 months with your trailer. And then it's a process the town has to try to move them away. This ordinance is an attempt to find another lever to encourage people to move those people on their property who are being disorderly and causing problems to move away, feel the pinch of some kind of community concern. So that was the genesis of it. It's based on a number of similar ordinances that are used all around us. The one disadvantage that the town of Baldwin has is that we don't have a police force. So the way this is structured is that it will rely on people to report issues to the police or to the town, to document things that are going on around their houses, and report it to us. And through that process, then the town will, the select board ends up being adjudicating whether the house is a disorderly house or not. And from that, then fines can be issued. I don't know how many people have read through it, but that's the basis of it. And tonight we're here to hear any concerns or amplifications, what people think might be the problems with what we've drafted. What would happen after this, if we think that from what we hear tonight that this is a good thing to do, we will then refine it a little bit based on what we hear tonight, and then move forward with a town vote on the ordinance. I guess we open it up for public comment at this point. If there's some questions that you want to ask us.
Yeah, I was surprised at the 3 events in 60 days. To me, that is a lot of events in a short period of time. And I was wondering why it wasn't 100 days, 90 days, 180 days. Why 60?
That's what we saw in other towns. And I don't know, you know, I get a sense that some of this stuff is happening very regularly, so it won't be hard to meet that criteria.
Unrelated, do you have currently police departments or a way of seeing the number of calls they get for Baldwin and seeing where they are and how often they are?
Farrader, what's his sergeant? Is he sergeant?
Yeah, Sergeant.
Sergeant Farrader came when we first reviewed this and spoke with the selectmen and anybody else who wanted to attend. He has the reports. He has them available for us. He will provide them for us, and he will work with us to make this ordinance work. It's available.
So were there any, I mean, by looking at those records, are there any that would currently, or like in the past year, be okay?
And there may be more, I think, we're just starting to hear about stuff.
So the town would act as the enforcing authority because the sheriff's department cannot enforce a local ordinance.
That's right. Yeah. So it's something new for the town, something new for the select board. I think the only alternative to this would be to try to hire a sheriff.
Yeah, that's a price tag about $200,000.
Right. So it's,
I've read this over several times, and it's pretty good. For years, I've dealing with nuisances and complaints, and it's hard to draw a line when a little bit's okay and too much is too much. Here, they're calling in the police to adjudicate a situation and write up a document, and that's pulling the trigger that is getting bad enough and has to be dealt with. It's strong and it's good. It's very much needed. And once the trigger's pulled, the selectmen can take it and negotiate a consent agreement to keep it out of court and have the property owners, the residents, realize how serious it is and that they have to abide by the ordinance. And that's a shortcut and it's workable. If that falls apart, then they're free to take it to court. It's strong, it's good, I like it, and it's much needed.
I would like to mention that I totally agree with what Wes just said, and I also want to commend the three of you for the work that you've been doing. It is so necessary as one who has been a victim of certain things in this town, and it's high time that it gets done, that an ordinance. I came in May to ask for an ordinance, and there was not one. And I talked to Wes, and we had good conversation. So I am very happy, and Jerry too, to see that this is in the works. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gary?
Yeah, I just would like to use a comparison. If we were asking the police force in the past about making sure speed limits were observed, and they asked whether a sign was posted or not, because unless there was a sign posted, then there's no breaking of the law. So I think this is smart. This is to have some teeth so that you can actually solidify the fact that you have a problem and you're going to address it.
Lori?
Is this based word for word on other ordinances from other towns, or is it kind of pieced together?
It's pieced together, yeah. I did a lot of plagiarizing from bigger towns down on the coast that have different types of problems. Quite often a disorderly house is one where they have prostitution or something like that, but others situations apply as well, where there's too much noise day after day after day. So I tried to tailor this more closely to what we think our situation is, but it would apply here as well for that. It's, I think Bridgeton has a disorderly house ordinance that I took a little bit from there. But we couldn't do exactly the same because, as I say, we don't have our own internal police force.
I guess my feeling is there's just a couple places, I absolutely see the need for it. I think we need to have something. But I guess my concern is a couple places where it felt a little open-ended, where, let's say, a neighbor who doesn't like their neighbor and somebody's music is playing too loud. It's just, you know, is it going to be misused in that way? The only example I'll give is on the second page, the last sentence, where it talks about under the influence of drugs on public ways in the vicinity of the building, other similar activities in the building. I just felt like, so what does that mean? You can't have loud music those kinds of things where it just feels so open-ended that I would worry about it being used, in ways that weren't.
So, I mean, you can have loud music in your house, but you can't have loud music in your house that disturbs your neighbors over and over again. And so this would be an instance where the music is escaping the house and into the house next door.
Right, but that's not clear from just that clause, that one phrase. That's all there's just a couple places where it feels like it could be.
Okay, I will see if we can clarify that, but it's really, are you disturbing somebody else?
Right.
Is that where like, if I called on a neighbor, say, and they were playing music, that's where the police would come and they would assess and make a report and determine whether or not it falls against the ordinance? Is that how that works, or, I mean, or do they have to go up there several,
You might have to go several times. You report.
But it's up to I read it online, so does that mean that the police and the town will then assess the situation and they'll make a determination whether it falls against the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
It says, and involve the arrest of the owners or tenants. So that is kind of like, are they gonna be warned by the police, or, because that and is rather, say, okay, on B, definitions, letter B, it says, 3 or more business in any 60-day period, and involve the arrest of such arrest. So do they have to be actually arrested if the police come three times? Two separate things. Or more, but it says. A disorderly house is constituted by 3 or more times in any 60-day period. And involved. That's like a legal sticking point, I think.
So the intent is,
could be with a good defense lawyer.
either A, B, or C could apply to a situation. It doesn't have to be all of those.
I'm very happy about the ordinance, by the way. And
Yeah, but I know that we don't expect it to be perfect, so we will listen to suggestions.
well, also I have a question about, there's several families living in this one house, and where there's contention between the families, why would the other 2 families, or 3 or 4, or however many are there, be held liable for the actions of the one family who is causing problems?
I know.
You see my point?
Yeah, I know, but,
Yeah.
That's something that would be dealt with if they had to deal with a complaint or a series of complaints. Every case is gonna obviously need its own attention.
Adjudication for it. That was just one of my concerns.
yeah, well, we don't wanna get in the middle of family squabbles, but.
No, that's the thing, how do you legislate morality,
He said if they end up having to fine somebody because they can't be worked with or brought around, then they would be fined, and that would be against the property owner,
Yeah, all of the property owners.
Yep.
Who's ever on a mortgage? I would think.
If you read through here, there's provisions for squabbles amongst the family that cause a disruption, but, when it's one person in the family complaining against another, then we probably wouldn't find the person who complains, or we try to adjudicate that so that, we don't put the person inside the house in jeopardy.
Right.
Really what we're concerned about is calming the activity at the house, and so that they're not disturbing the neighborhood.
I think I can answer that a little bit. What you're dealing with is a domestic situation. What this deals with is the domestic situation happens and spills outside, and a disorderly conduct with the neighborhood bothers the neighbor makes a complaint, then it's applicable. because you're disturbing the
Got a
neighborhood.
peaceful neighborhood.
Within the house, a domestic, conduct, is a completely different situation.
Yes, it does have a cutout for the domestic.
And once it spills outside and bothers the neighbor, and the neighbor complains, then the police force steps in. They've had the experience and the exposure, and they have the authority to enforce. That's where this comes in.
Excuse me. Does this also relate to like a sound or speed limit ordinance?
Not a speed limit ordinance.
Okay.
But if.
Squealing tires, smoking, burnouts.
That, I think, would apply if you have a neighbor that's
Yeah,
got.
I'm just asking, just a question I have, sir, just for everyone, it happens on all our streets, you can see it on the highways, all side roads, main roads in Baldwin, Cornish, Standish, Wilmington, everywhere, but just a question I have.
It would apply if, you've got a neighbor who's constantly burning out, squealing tires, at their house. Once they get out on the street and, go down the road, I don't know that would apply, but if they're squealing tires in their driveway, causing smoke and disruption to others in the neighborhood, then it would apply, yeah.
You hit on something.
No.
It isn't just Baldwin, it's Cornish, it's Standish. So where is the authorities that they haven't
Yes, sir.
put a finger down a little bit on something like this?
Yes, sir, correct.
So we've got that still facing us right now, and the enforcement of this is gonna come hard.
Absolutely. And also heavy truck traffic on a small road is destroying our streets. It really is. It's costing you and I and everyone here, it's destroying our roads. On a small little street, why is a loaded logging truck doing 45 miles an hour on a 20-foot roadway? When the corner's easy enough to make, I've driven truck all my life. There's no reason to.
I think our road commissioner's gonna address that.
I'm just a question, sir, no complaints, just a question.
The speed limits, we can't do much about.
Right.
Oh, it's a dragway. It's Fremont Avenue dragway. Quarter-mile drag strip.
We've got the
Smart
state
Street.
involved, yeah.
Oh, Smart
Oh,
Street,
no.
I don't deserve the 45 mile per hour.
Smart Street's 45. Go, have at it.
UPS, FedEx, they're all speed limits even.
Logging trucks go on 9 wheels around the corner, and then the other 9 touch when they hit, and they keep going.
What you can do too is get up a petition and send it to the state and have them lower that.
That'll take years.
Right, yeah.
Well, they tell us the minute.
They didn't come out and look, because obviously the map that she showed me had no places down on that road.
Yeah.
No homes. 45 miles an hour.
Right, yeah, that's right, I didn't make sense.
But they'll do a speed study.
Yeah.
But your speed could also increase as a result of that
Right.
speed study, so you want to be very careful. But I believe that towns do have the authority to set their speed limits on town roads.
Only if you've got 18,000 people of your population. After 18,000 people, you can do that. But in front of that, state has authority over it.
Yeah, we don't have 18,000.
Gary?
Now, with regards to this ordinance, I think the operable word is repetitiveness. Because what I'm getting is when this lady is saying, I mean, how many people have had a wedding reception or anniversary party or something, maybe the music goes from 11 to 12, somebody may call, but that's not every day, every week, every month.
Right.
And you usually, the neighbors work it out amongst them. In fact, the best thing is call, invite them over to the party. But no, I think you guys are spot on, is repetitively, you're dealing with the same thing over and over and over again. At the same location.
I have no doubt that this type of an ordinance is needed. I find a few problems with this. In section 9, section 9 on the overpage, second line in that first paragraph on the overpage, we refer to city. And I'm sure that's a result of cutting and pasting, which I'm in favor of. I've done plenty of it. Have you got that, Bob?
No, I don't see it.
It's just about paragraph 10, if you're on the overpage.
On the last page.
I'll take that out. But much more important than that, I'm right on the same page as Laurie. This is a little too open-ended. In purpose, about the fourth line, who disturb the peace and tranquility of the community and the ability of persons of reasonable sensibilities to peaceably enjoy their own premises in a manner that's free from loud and otherwise disruptive behavior or nuisance. And then if we go into the next page, definition 5A, about third line down, we talk about things which would have a tendency to unreasonably disturb the community, the neighborhood, or an ordinary individual, and this is including but not limited to loud music and stuff. Now, I think this was cut and pasted from towns where you might not have somebody who wants to fire up the chainsaw and cut up 10 cords of wood in the side yard.
That's not every day.
That can happen in Baldwin, and I can see somebody who had a problem with their neighbor calling the cops and saying, I am unable to enjoy peaceful quiet in my home. We also go out in the backyard, some of us in target shoot. Some people find that offensive in various ways. Doesn't bother me. I think we need to think a little further on things that happen in Baldwin but don't happen every day in Cape Elizabeth, places like that, and cut out some exemptions for normal rural activities. I'm not sure what I would use, and that's going to take some thinking, and I'm willing to do a little bit more of that myself, but I need help.
Yeah, I do know that we do have a shooting range ordinance, and in our land use ordinance, people are allowed to set up a little shooting range.
Yeah, I wrote that back when I was on the planning board, and I can see this coming into possible conflict with that. One person says, hey, we got an ordinance that says I can shoot in the backyard, and somebody else says, well, yeah, but it's a loud noise, and it disturbs my peaceful enjoyment of my property, which is a term in law. So we gotta specify that a little tighter. And I don't know what else. Kids riding around in the backfield on their dirt bikes, that's not a bad activity. Kids riding around on a snowmobile and on their skidoos.
Yep. Oh, that's all.
I think we gotta work on that. Getting down a little further, 5C, situations to which the visit pertains shall be documented by any police department. As you mentioned, we don't own any police department, and we are not legally authorized to shall any public, any law enforcement to do anything they don't want to. Where else do I have? Yeah, we've got city another time. Oh no, there's 2 pages. Okay. Now getting down to penalties, and this is what also scares me. 11 penalties right down towards the end. It says in about the 4th line in the 11 penalties, the town may enter into a consent agreement to correct or abate a violation. The town may also seek injunctive relief and relief. Okay, what I was looking for is line 3. In addition to or in lieu of assessing a monetary penalty, the town may enter into a consent agreement. What worries me about this is that it has the possibility of being inconsistent. You find one party, but you enter into a consent agreement with the other. I can see a situation where somebody says, well, you're not treating me the same as you did that other troublemaker, and, you know, we're both troublemakers and we ought to be treated the same. And I can further see us getting into a legal situation where somebody says, well, you don't like me because of my national origin or my race or sexual preference or religion or something like that, and here comes the Pine Tree Legal and the MCLU. That bothers me because all that's going to cost is legal money, defending ourselves, or we have to drop it.
Yeah.
I don't know how to solve that tonight, but I think
the whole issue, is one that's open for, people to hire lawyers.
Oh, yeah, including the town, which I know you boys don't like.
Yeah, and,
But we've made the decision that something's gotta be done, so we're ready to trip the trigger if we have to.
Right.
Well, and again,
Amen.
if that is the case, you gotta say, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and,
That's right.
you know, sail into the harbor and do it.
Yeah.
Again, I can see situations where people are gonna say, I got treated worse than the other guy.
I think what we tried to do is to make it so that we don't have to put the hammer down on everybody, realizing that there will be situations that are egregious enough that they needed to be adjudicated by the selectmen, but don't need to be treated to the person who's been before us 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, but again, I think you're putting yourself as selectmen and future selectmen and the town itself into a situation that's gonna potentially cost us a lot of money and grief.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that we ought to back away from this, but we need to think about how that's gonna play out, and are we really willing to, as you say, pull the trigger and continue with the situation.
Yep, I think about it, see if there's some way to make it less open-ended.
Every case is gonna be different.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so you gotta be consistent.
Yeah.
You know,
And because every case is different, it's hard to be consistent.
Well, that's-
You're damned if you do, damned if you
that's
don't.
where the lawyers come in.
Yeah.
You know, you hate to see it, but
Oh, yeah.
if you don't do it,
Yeah.
you don't gain.
So,
Absolutely.
I'll tell you that our town lawyers already reviewed this and made a few changes, and, so it's been through the town lawyer.
We still working with David?
Yeah.
Good.
As we all know, though, we'd like to see some business.
He's got him drastically.
He's got dudes at the golf course too.
Go ahead.
I just want to mention, in a court of law, not all sentences are the same for the same crime.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things are looked at, you know, is it a first offense?
Right.
Has the person showed remorse? So it's not, gonna be
I think it depends
exact,
on.
and there's always going to be, debate,
Yeah.
but
I
I think it's a
depends on
good
the
start in
person's cooperating with
tweaking
us. Yeah.
it, and, you know, exactly what you're doing, listening to all the opinions of the people. I think this can, be made into something that will, meet the needs of the town.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to mention that often it's degree and length of time. You mentioned, noise. When a minor goes back and forth on a mini bike on a Friday afternoon for 3 hours, that's definitely a noise issue and would be covered by this. But if a kid just rides down a couple times, it's not
Right.
an issue.
Right.
But 3 hours, and that has happened.
Yeah. I know, probably have, yeah.
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 Yeah, there's been a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Well, are they on the road?
Oh, yeah.
That makes it,
Yeah.
Bob, that's the lady in the blue shirt, got her hand up.
Oh, well, I had it up.
Go ahead.
Can you just please, elaborate on number 2? Does that mean can you just explain that?
You say 3?
Number 2?
2.
Does that mean you can't
All right.
live in a building on your property or in a camper, or
Let me read it here.
are you allowed to do what you want on?
No person shall occupy as owner occupant, or shall allow another to occupy a dwelling unit, auxiliary dwelling unit, tiny home, camper, rooming house, or rooming unit, herein jointly and severally called buildings, which is a disorderly house as defined. So, if there is somebody in one of those units, houses, buildings, whatever, on your property, and they have been deemed as a disorderly house, it's up to you as the owner to move them out.
What if you are on, or what if somebody else in your neighborhood is doing that? And
I don't know. I'm assuming you're concerned about your house, is that, or?
well, not necessarily, because no, not necessarily, but if, say for instance, somebody goes and decides tomorrow they're gonna build a tiny house or a building next door to me on their property,
Yeah.
and then somebody moves in and they're being loud or disruptive, is that considered, like, can you do that? Can you build something or have a camper on your property that somebody's living in?
Yeah, I mean, there are ordinances that allow you to do things with your land, and, up to 7 months a year.
So it only becomes an issue if they're being
Disorderly.
loud
Yeah.
or disruptive,
Right.
or doing something they shouldn't, okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to do it.
But that doesn't mean that you can't have a tiny home or anything, I mean,
Well, 'cause a lot of people have campers and that they sleeping in the summertime, or whatever, or have visitors, or, I just wanted you,
there are rules for those, but that doesn't mean you can't do it.
well, I'm doing
We're not
this area,
outlining
so
it.
I'm not, but, I gotta read up on some stuff.
Go ahead, Mark.
As I said before, the beauty of this ordinance is calling the police in who have the experience and exposure to make decisions of whether disorderly conduct is and how serious it is. Once they write up the document and the perpetrator, the landowner, realizes the seriousness, then when the selectmen enter into a agreement of consent, it's likely they're gonna listen and try to obey a little better. And that short circuit, not going through the expense of taking the courts and time and everything else. This also references, Title 17-501A, disorderly conduct, which is, state law that the police follow. And it goes through a lot of description of disorderly conduct and whatnot. And eventually, if it's bad enough, and they get arrested and go to court, they can be charged with a Class E crime, which means 6 months in jail, $1,000 fine. So this is enforceable, in steps. You hope that by talking to the perpetrator and coming to an agreement, things will smooth out and they'll listen and obey right away. If not, if there's a repeat offense, then it goes to court and then they go to jail.
Yeah, I was wondering, if it would be prudent if you ran this by either the town attorney or MMA to see when there's some holes or.
We have.
You have?
Yeah.
And they basically, they were good with this?
David Laurie, yeah,
Up to this point?
Yeah.
So then you wanna go back and address Norm's concerns?
Right.
For them to fine tune it?
Right.
Me? I guess
My only hesitation and my main concern would be the safety of the three of you. I had a couple of incidents that I became aware of this summer where fentanyl was involved, and I think if you've got a homeowner or renter who is high on drugs and it all comes back on you, it could be pretty dangerous. You're not going to be armed. I'm considering being armed, and I hate guns. But how much, I don't even know if it's feasible to have a police or buy into the sheriffs. It just seems so much safer than having the three of you address this personally.
Well, the issue is if we don't have an ordinance, then there's nothing to be enforced. I don't know that I'm personally gonna go out and, knock on doors and say, you have a problem here.
You'll be accompanied by a sheriff?
Probably will be accompanied by a sheriff in most instances, because, as you say, you know, you don't have to watch too much TV to see people just getting very nervous and pulling out their personal weapon and using it.
Thank you for your concern, Kathy.
No, it's a very frightening thing, and I kind of bounce over the daisies unless there's a lot of noise, and I'm locking doors and taking my keys in. I can never find my keys. I
It's getting that way.
worry about the reality of some straight person enforcing something like this when you've got someone high.
You're right, yeah.
You've had that happen already, right? Or close to happen at your house?
I had a individual dropped off in my driveway on Sunday by a strange man. She was high on drugs, wandered through my property. The same thing happened on Friday.
Wow.
And I probably saw at least half a dozen others over the course of the weekend walking by my residence, obviously high.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
And I have teenage girls.
Yep.
So it's a reality, you know, whether we like it or not, but it's around us.
It's everything.
Yes, sir.
I'm Mark Walker. I live in Naples, so I apologize, but I'm running to be the District 84 representative to Augusta for Baldwin as well. You haven't expressly said anything, I don't see anything in the ordinance about a drug house, drug dealing house. Is it feasible that this place could clean up their act to the point where they don't violate any of this stuff, so they just have a drug house going on? You follow me? Is that, in other words, does it cut to the root of the problem? I had just imagined when I first heard about this a few days ago, I just mulled it over. I thought, what in the world would I do if I were to you guys? And you already thought through it more than I have, but I was thinking, I just throw this out. What if the ordinance were simpler, just to say, no residents may allow more than X number of people who don't reside there to come to that address in any given 24-hour period unless you have a permit from the state.
That's ridiculous.
Can't have Thanksgiving dinner.
The city would, or the town would give permits for that.
No.
But for the people who, no?
No.
If you make a big enough number, 100 or whatever?
We have an event, situation that they have to apply for an event or something like that.
Yeah.
That's what they
Well, I'm
do.
just thinking it would, obviously you give out permits left and right, if the number, well, especially if the number's real high. If it's, everybody knows this is something that's going on at their house, everybody enjoys, but that would mean that this drug house would not be able to comply. That's all I'm thinking. I'm not, just thinking to cut to something that's the heart of the activity going on, to shut that down.
we're concentrating on disturbances now.
Yeah, right,
disorderly, and, there are things that go on inside of houses that we don't see and we don't know about. It's hard to address those, even though they might be illegal.
And people have a right to privacy. It's working in the town office in this capacity as assistant to the selectman, is one matter, but as a deputy clerk on the other side, I experienced over the last few years residents coming in and just pleading for help, in various situations. You know, the police have come and, you know, they're out on the street the next day, or could be a different situation. What is the town gonna do about this? Or what can the town do about it? Without an ordinance, the town doesn't have any leg to stand on to help.
Well, I'm certainly not suggesting no ordinance, I'm just suggesting a different kind of ordinance, so, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, if we put an ordinance in, as you suggested, we would be in big trouble. I mean, we had 15 people spending the night for Thanksgiving one year.
Well, I don't think a drug house could survive if only 16 or 20 people a day come. I mean, this is the kind of,
but I'm just saying, I don't think there's no simple way to tell the difference, really, between people just family coming and going and drug people clients coming and going.
Well, if we were 100, 200 people, I think that would be so extraordinary.
But without talking about the actual activities itself.
Right.
And I think that's, when I look at number 2, it feels to me like, you're talking about a disorderly house, but really the problem is the people who are residing in that house at that particular time. Right. It's not the house, it's the house. Yeah. And one problem I have with that number 2 is that you talk about designating it as a disorderly house. Is that from now forever, or at some point? This is someone's property. At some point, if those people are gone, can it be rented again, or can people live there again? Like that's, I don't think
this is not the Scarlet Letter,
It could expire, the disorderly house could expire and it could go on to normal.
Does it say that in here somewhere? Because I didn't see it.
No, it's specifically to identify a pattern of behavior at the house which is disturbing to others around him, and we seek a solution to it. And if the solution is found, then the house is ready to start another.
Right. It would be good if it's just somehow that way, so that the problem is this pattern of behavior, and we're not condemning this house forever.
And it's meant to cover the various different structures on the property. Because you may have somebody that's living in the camper that's causing the problem, but if the ordinance didn't cover the camper or the chicken coop or the tiny home or whatever they're squatting in or staying in, then the town wouldn't be able to uphold the ordinance, because it would apply just to the house itself. Yes. It's a real good start. You're not gonna cover every scenario and every situation.
I have a comment about the consent agreement, so, if we could write something in there about, and keep this on an individual basis instead of the entire family, because normally in these situations, it is only 1 or 2 members who are creating the disorder, and the rest of the family is totally against it and has called the police, but are able to do nothing about it, because the police have told them that, or call a lawyer, I've been told. I mean, I can't afford a lawyer. I would love to evict certain members of my disorderly house, but I am unable to do that because of squatters' rights.
So, I'm just wondering if there could be something put into the consent agreement on individuality instead of just lumping the entire family. Because some people are abhorrent at the behavior of certain members.
We'll talk to a lawyer, but I'm not sure we can do that. Well, let's see.
Is anybody else?
Hi, I have one suggestion and then also one question. The suggestion would be on changing it from 3 out of every 60 days to 5 out of every 60 days, primarily because of the noise complaint. You can have a dog on your property barking at something more than 3 times in 60 days. You can also have multiple parties that may have noise outside the house in more than 60 days, like Halloween, Christmas, New Year's. And 3 just being too few to really see if it's an actual problem like the drug dens and things that you are all describing versus just a neighborly dispute of someone not being invited to a party or not liking the dog or something like that. So that's my suggestion, is changing to 5 out of 60. And then my question is, what is your estimate on what this will cost the town? If you're constantly having to call in additional support for delivering these notices or checking out different scenarios, how much are you estimating that this will cost?
Cost estimate. Right now, we get support from the Cumberland County Police, and it does cost us.
We pay the county tax.
Oh, yeah, we pay the county tax.
Once we pay the tax, you'll see.
We have a code enforcement officer who delivers notices, but, so that's all paid for so far. But as was mentioned earlier, we might get into litigation, and that's where the real money comes in. It's a common problem in any community when you try to enforce ordinances. You quite often incur litigation costs, which you might ask yourself whether the cost is worth what you're gaining. But on the other hand, you can't let things run like this, and that's why I think we have to take the chance. I wanted to mention, though, that barking dogs is a different thing. We have a barking dog ordinance in the animal control ordinance that addresses those. You call the animal control officer and they come and adjudicate that. So that's a separate issue.
And then the social events, you can have more than 3 in 60 days reasonably.
Well, as long as the law enforcement don't get involved. If the police have to be called because of drunkenness or, then you can start counting them. But if you have a party one night, next night, and you're not disturbing anybody, and the police aren't called, we're not putting a limit on the amount of parties you can have. As long as you're not getting it out of control.
When you're creating a disturbance for the neighbors.
Right, yeah.
So going forward from here, what is your timeline? You've had this public meeting to see if there's a concern or people in agreement with it. Obviously, they feel there is. So when you do your corrections or adjustments and so on, are you going to come back and have a special town meeting to vote on this, or how are you going to do it?
That's what's required, and we have to go through the public announcements, make the thing available, issue a warrant, call the meeting, we'll discuss it again then, and it'll either be an up or down and vote on it at that point. But first thing we need to do is go back and look at it based on the comments that we've received tonight, try to improve it. We'll look at it amongst ourselves to see if we think we've met the comments. We'll float it through the town attorney again to see what he thinks about the changes.
Would there be another hearing like this, or?
No, I don't expect so. I think we've gotten the comments, and we'll try to do the best that we can to incorporate the intent of the comments.
It will.
Is it something that that shouldn't wait till the regular town meeting, rather than have all the expense of a special town meeting? Isn't that?
It's not that expensive.
It isn't?
No.
Okay.
And what we find is if you just keep waiting and waiting, you'll end up with a huge backlog of stuff to deal with at the regular town meeting. I don't know, seems like in the last year and a half, we've gotten a lot of special issues that we need to address at town meetings of one type or another, so we've pretty much been scheduling them when we're ready for them. And generally, we're trying to do them like we do now, which is prior to a selectmen's meeting or a workshop. If it's something that's very important, we might do it on a Saturday, but what we find is that quite often you don't get as much participation on a Saturday as we do like right here tonight, so.
Yeah.
When there's something important, the people will show up, I think.
Well, when there's something important to them.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
Anybody else? Paul, you give me a funny look.
I've been holding back because I thought it might have already been answered, but, let me back to, it says in C that such documentation may include sworn affidavits by citizens which may be sufficient to create a reasonable suspicion. Does that mean that that might not even be an event that's happening that night? That someone might call and give it a sworn affidavit of something happening?
See what?
Second page,
Under the five.
Under five?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, there we go.
Last sentence of C.
I won't see. I think you're on the wrong spot.
Just before documentation, just above it.
I'm at 5-1. So, what we're hinting at, we might clarify this, is that you might not always have a police report, but we might have sworn affidavits from, neighbors, that indicate something's going on.
Not necessarily that night, maybe it happened last week.
A detailed written complaint.
You have to explain when you were there and when something happened. I don't quite understand the question.
Well, if the police aren't called, but there's an event taking place that you should warrant that, but they don't get called, does this say that this documentation may include sworn affidavits by citizens?
Yes. Yes. Which may be sufficient to create a reasonable suspicion said illegal activity has occurred.
So the sworn affidavit would not necessarily mean that the police came, that they...
That's right. It could be that the individual swore an affidavit that something happened.
Right, and the police never investigated it.
Right.
Okay.
Now, does that count as the three police visits, the three strikes? I don't know.
It may.
We need to decide sometime.
We'll get that cleared up.
Yeah.
Well, the first sentence in 5C says, the situations to which the visit pertains shall be documented by any police department in the jurisdiction. Such documentation may include. So that says that this documentation has to come from the police. So they could collect some affidavits, but it's not like people coming to the town office and giving you an affidavit. It has to, at least the way I read it.
Right.
It
Yeah.
says but the police department
doesn't necessarily mean that the police witnessed.
Exactly. Right. But they're involved. They were called.
Yeah.
For example, saying a neighbor saying, I saw 20 people within 2 hours going in and out of this house on this date. Here's a video.
Here's my video camera footage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so the affidavit then would have to be given to the police, then the police would give it to you. Is that how you're, all right. And what's the role of the code enforcement officer? I mean, would that individual be like driving up and down the roads at all, to, like they do for other things?
No, I don't think
Everything,
so.
so everything would go through the police and then to you?
Yeah.
The code enforcement officer might be, involved in, issuing a notice to the occupant,
Right.
of a hearing.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
The only other thing that I wanted to bring up in conversation, some input about this, is the world in which we are today. I don't do Facebook. I know people do, and that's a very valuable, item, if you will. Problems on our road, being told about people in the area, theft, stealing different things, seeing vehicles. Now, probably somebody could get you for character assassination, I don't know, in today's world. But a picture taken of a particular vehicle, a person sitting in it, up on our road, everybody is aware on our road who lives there, who's been invited to come in, and who doesn't belong there. And going down and parking next to the vehicle, looking at the person, immediately they back up and they take off. And you find they're from Parsonsfield, they're from New Hampshire. They're not from Brown Road, or McNeil Road, or Saddleback Road. So if people have that capability, and you see something going on, maybe you want to share that into, you can get something like this implemented. And it's a very valuable tool, I think. It's worked on our road.
How many people in here got cell phones right now with cameras on them?
Yeah.
Almost everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't do it, you still got that flip phone, don't you? Yeah,
Pretty grainy though.
right, yeah, it was small, it wasn't big. I had one.
Anybody else?
Well, you gentlemen are on the right track.
Thank you.
And as a community, we appreciate that. And we'll work with you, we're behind you, and absolutely, you're on the right track.
Now, where do you live?
Fremont Avenue driveway.
Jim, it's called the 107-113 bypass.
I call it Fremont Avenue driveway. But you guys are doing, this is great, to implement this, and as a community, I'm sure we'll all stand behind you and work with you, and like you said, be safe, all of us be safe. It's a strange world today. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is one final question. What's the role of the budding property owners in a situation like this? Do you consult them and talk with them? Because they're the people that would know best, right?
Right, yeah.
So is that part of your hearing, or?
We would assume that the abutters who are complaining,
I'm sure that
most likely to be witnessing the situation, calling police.
All right.